All right, here we go. Let me get some Benny up here. And get the chat room window up. Yeah, here we are. Oh, dear. Hot dog, I remember the password. Wasn't sure I could do that. Hey, Denise. Good morning, everybody. Miles hears the music. Here he comes. Gonna make that jump, Miles? Morning, Karen and Larry. Always wait till my head is turned, don't you, Miles? Hey, Sarah. Hey, Lorena and Tony in Egg Harbor.
Benny Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, the man with the
Hey, Todd. Hey, Laura.
and even more torrid band who purveys assorted rhythms, all danceable, in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago. And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Skies.
Miles, you sniffing at my gum? Morning, Vicky and Laura. Hey, Dad. Hey, Mona and Ron. Miles. You're going to actually hear him meowing on here. But he does. Hey, Gladys. Hey, Heather. Hey, Emily. Hey, everybody. I'll just sit here and be patient. Hey, Marcia. Welcome back. Hey, Bob. Hey, Octavio. Hey to everybody, all and sundry. Hey, Bridget and Mary Jo. Hey, Casey. Hey, Amy. Hey, Jerry. Hey, Casey. Hot Arizona, you keep that. Haha. All right, Bob, the book finally came. Excellent. And hello, Carolyn's mom. Hey, Luann. Hey, Becky. Hey, Barbara. Morning, Kathleen. Hey, everybody. Bridget, sorry to hear that. Morning, Jennifer. Hey, Gail. Yeah, that's a very interesting way. They got played really fast and loose with margins and kerning on these things. Not to mention spelling. Hey, Susan. Miles, stay off the keyboard, please. Miles, just curl it up, okay? You can curl up.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Morning, Mom. Hey, kitty. Good morning, everybody. I don't know if this is going to get to full length today, but still the Venmo's right there. Trying to get a bill paid tomorrow. Morning, Eileen. Hail in Peoria, huh? Was it hail or grapple? I'm really into the whole grapple thing now. Glad to have you. Oh, I gotta figure out what to do for Patreon next week too. It's the thing when I do several weeks ahead of time, when it catches back up, you're like, wait a minute. I knew I was gonna be out of town and doing taxes for the last recent period. And the stars above you. Did the Tombstone engravers use stencils? No, I don't think they did. If so, they might have been able to line up a little bit better and knowing they were going to be running out of space. By the end of the 1800s, people were kind of, everybody who wrote about these engravings were just kind of embarrassed by them. These hideous death's heads, skulls and crossbones, cherubs.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walk, Jenny Walk.
I doubt they used a dictionary. The spelling on these things is awfully creative. Hey, Grandma Belle. And Bella. Hey, everybody. Welcome along to a Sunday morning edition. Just thought I'd kind of update you on some of the stuff I've been working on lately. Among other things. I'm also working on... Let me export another version of this. Oh dear. Also, really leaning towards just finally putting out this one novel. This is the cover. This might go up on Kindle shortly. I don't know about hard copy yet. That's a lot harder. Might be able to work something out, but it'd be probably prohibitively expensive. Gangsters of Oak Park and River Forest. That's a possibility. Hey, Karen. I decided not to do this one entirely formally. Just because I don't know how far behind I am, really. A lot of this info that I've been digging up on these things, pun absolutely intended, is not really that well organized yet. Hey, Patty.
And they all loved it. They all loved those passages when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same vein, Rosetta.
Hey, Joanne. Kathy has just signed up for the Patreon. Thank you, Kathy. Am I blurry? I don't think I'm blurry. Hey, Denise. All right, we'll give Benny Goodman another tune to go through here. All right, Bob. Miles has already appeared. Priya is now over back on the couch. She just settled in. You can see her moving around there a bit. Hey, Ellen. Morning, everybody. I should come out with a series of mysterious Chicago lower back tattoos. You know what I was actually thinking of is scratch and sniff stickers. Hey, Amy. Now maybe a bit of blur just coming from this light leaf. Hang on.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room.
That kind of thing always drives me nuts.
Downtown Chicago. And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of...
All right, that's about enough of the Benny, so let's just pop in right here. All right, welcome along, everybody. I can see the last time I did this. So welcome. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now, but also the last 5 I have also been a tour guide in New York City. And my current project that I've been working on, among the many projects that I'm working on right now, is all about the cemeteries that are in Lower Manhattan. These are very interesting to me because they're such a different style from what I usually work on. I do a lot of Chicago cemetery stuffs, including things like Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, out last year. But we never see these like really old ones with the death's head and epitaphs like, "When the Lord sees fit to end my time, with thy beloved dust I'll mingle mine." You just don't see those, but those were kind of things were out of fashion by the time people really started being buried in Chicago with headstones in earnest. So, I've been going through a whole lot of stuff at Trinity Churches trying to find out who all of these people were. So let's just take a quick look. This is Trinity Churchyard, as it appears at night. You can walk up right around here. We'll show a few establishing shots. When this version of Trinity Church was built, it was the tallest building in Manhattan. For a second, I thought that was a ghost over there. That's the night watchman. At least I'm pretty sure it's the night watchman, and probably not a ghost. Well, let's just move on in here. Give you a few good establishing shots. We'll cover a couple of these stories here. There was a talk for a while, this is Pine Street, remember Pine Street? There was once talk of expanding Pine Street, cutting off the northern end of the cemetery here. Let me give you a good look at another overview shot here. So it's just this little churchyard. There's this side and a smaller one on the other side. And there's this guy. Now the site of great tourist traffic is right on the other side is Alexander Hamilton, as well as Eliza. Angelica is thought to be back over there, but we'll talk about her in a second. But exactly how many people are buried here, nobody is entirely sure. I think that 20,000 is probably a pretty good estimate, but nobody knows for sure. You can see on the back here just how high up over the street we are. Just down there was the crypt of the only nobleman who fought for the Americans in the Revolution. Here's the back wall of it. And part of the reason that it looks like this is the whole place is honeycombed with these brick vaults underneath the ground. And if you were to walk through, there's a little door right over here. If you walk through, it looks about like this, but there are also little doors here and there that lead to things like the Bleecker Vault. This is the Bleecker family. So all over, this whole place is just honeycombed with these old brick crypts. I'm really hoping that in the process of doing a book on this, they'll let me have some access to get inside and see a couple of them. I'm not really sure that they will, but we'll find out. So let's just cover a couple of my favorites. We'll start with one that I know I've covered before, but I just love this guy so much that we got to cover it again. Adam Allen, comedian. Now this is a fairly spooky monument to begin with his angel head. Now, there was a good quote from the 1800s saying, "Do you believe that heaven will really have cherubs like this all over the place? I hope not." This is Adam Allen, comedian, who departed this life in February 1768. The stone was erected by the American Theater Company as a testimony to their unfeigned regard. He possessed many good qualities, but as he was a man, he had the frailties common to man's nature. Now, it's hard to know exactly what these frailties might have been. We do know that he went bankrupt when he was in the UK. I think he went bankrupt more than twice. But then in the States, he was mostly playing comedy characters in shows like A Miss in Her Teens or The Stagecoach, a comedy. He played roles like Lord Chalkstone and Ernesto in The Orphan. These are like the kind of roles that Jack Black might have played. His wife sang and danced and played Lady Capulet now and then. I know that he played Friar Lawrence in Romeo and Juliet, notably in Mr. Fribble in A Maid in Her Teens. One person who attended that said nothing could be lower than that play. So, gives us some idea anyway. Let's just move up here a little bit. See what all we're going to cover. What I really want to cover today is mostly some new stuff. For one thing, there's stuff that we've covered a little bit before, but not too much. We'll probably see Hamilton while we're here, but I'm just going to cover some of the people I've been researching the last couple of weeks. Over here, this is the Livingston Vault of Robert Livingston and Co., among other people in there. But the little sign, the little historical marker there says that it is the burial place of Angelica Schuyler Church, who is known as one of the sons of Mr. Schuyler, whose sister Eliza married Alexander Hamilton. So this is Angelica Eliza. Peggy is buried someplace else. But if you really grill Trinity Church on this, they'll say that they really don't know where Angelica is. There's tradition that goes back to the 1800s saying that she's in the Livingston Vault. She had a connection to the Livingston family, but there's really no document one way or the other. The records just say Trinity Church. She could be buried pretty much anywhere here. But inside of it, it's interesting that they only put her on the sign, because elsewhere, this is the family of Robert R. Livingston. Now, Robert R. Livingston was one of the Committee of Five drafted to assigned to draft the Declaration of Independence. I would say, well, they don't put him in because he's not in a musical, but he is. He's one of the guys in 1776 singing "Bar Stability, Bar Stability." So both he and Angelica are probably down in there singing their songs about people never being satisfied and suggesting sexual promiscuity. Must be an interesting parties they have down here in the Livingston Vault. Now, elsewhere in the Livingston Vault, we'll just cover quickly. Now, they've got a monument to this guy clear on the other side of the cemetery next to Hamilton. But there's a guy who married into the Livingston family. He's actually over in the vault. A guy by the name of Robert Fulton. You've heard the name Fulton if you're in Chicago. He is the namesake of Fulton Street. You've also heard him in Georgia. He's the namesake of Fulton County. This was the guy who invented the first practical steamships. He wasn't the first guy ever to try traveling with steam, but he kind of perfected it. He was generally credited as the inventor of the steamship, first guy who really made them work. Started out working for Napoleon, designing things like the Nautilus submarine and also steamships and torpedoes, then started working for the British, then moved over to the United States. It's really almost impossible to say just how much of an impact this guy's inventions had over the years. That's why he has so many things named after him. But he's married a woman named Harriet Livingston of the Livingston family. I believe she was a niece of Robert. And Robert was over in France for a while with Mr. Fulton working on steamships with them and at one point, Robert noticed that he had fallen in love with Harriet, who was quite a bit younger than he was. They bonded over things like painting. This is actually, she did miniature paintings herself. So Mr. Fulton asked Mr. Livingston, do you suppose if I asked her father, he would give me permission to marry her? And the guy, to his credit, said, well, really, you should ask her, not her father. That's pretty good. Now, initially, she was married to a guy by the name of George Eaker, who is best remembered in history for having shot Philip Hamilton, who is probably buried over here by the Alexander Hamilton Monument, which is just behind us here. But Eaker died not too long after that. I'll move back. We'll put up the Hamilton one while we're here. You can't do a Trinity Church without covering Hamilton. So this is Alexander. This is a large monument after his duel. Eliza, who died 50 years after he did. And the other small marker right below me here says that Philip Hamilton, his son, who was killed in a duel, is probably here as well. But they don't really know. They know he's in Trinity someplace. But like Angelica, they don't really know. And right across from Hamilton and Fulton, in fact, right in this little space that's difficult to photograph well, this is Hercules Mulligan. This is the time he fell and did not get back up again. Sorry, too soon? Hercules Mulligan was a friend of Hamilton, saved George Washington's life a couple of times, but also may not really be here. According to the Trinity records, he was actually buried at St. John's Burying Ground, several blocks north of here. You might remember a couple of weeks ago when we were in New York doing our morning mini tours, I went up to St. John's Burying Ground, which is now just a playground. They just built a park right over that cemetery, by some accounts just leaving all of the headstones standing, so if you sifted through the dirt, you might actually find them. According to Trinity records, Hercules Mulligan was buried there, but family records say that he was buried at Trinity, so difficult to know for sure. It's very difficult to get into these kind of things. Well, let's go ahead and pop up a little bit to what I've been working on quite a bit. This one I just get fascinated by. This is James Leeson up at the front. He was a butcher by trade and a Freemason. Hence, like you can see the symbol kind of tilted to the side on the right. Some very interesting symbols on James Leeson here. For one thing, on the left is an hourglass with wings. Do you know why he put wings on the hourglass? Because he wanted to see time fly. That's kind of a joke answer. It's akin to like, why did the man put a car in the oven? Because he wanted a hot rod. But really, this is supposed to a Freemason symbol used to remind you that time is fleeting. It's astounding. Time is fleeting. Madness takes its toll. But up above, check out the arch there. That is actually a cryptogram. And I'm not sure how long it took for people to realize that there was a cryptogram, a hidden message on this thing. The first newspaper articles I can find that mention this gravestone mention the lines written below it, but they don't mention the cryptogram at all. It wasn't until about the 1870s, 1880s that you started seeing articles that talk about the cryptogram and including the solution. If you see what he's done is he laid out 3 tic-tac-toe grids with dots to signify whether it was 1, 2, or 3, then put all the letters into there. And if you decode from that, you get the words, remember death. But here's the interesting thing here. Let me bring up another shot of him. This one will do. Here's a somewhat larger shot. You can scroll down here. He departed this life, that it's got all of that. But if you look down below there, you can see that there are a couple more lines. Some of the older pictures, now this part was actually buried at one point in the 1920s. But there are a couple more lines down there. There's 4 altogether in some of the older pictures. But according to Trinity's office, they could not find a single thing saying what it actually said. Put myself up above here. But I did manage to find a couple of newspaper articles, one from the 1850s that said what it was. It says, while life remained, a brother had a friend, till fleeting moments fixed his journey end. Read this, and copy all those acts of love, till all assemble in the lodge above. Now, the lodge above is a term that they occasionally use for heaven in Freemason text, but the rest of this quatrain is so weird that I almost have to wonder if maybe there's another hidden message in there. Like there's read this and copy all those acts of love. Sometimes you would see like read my riddle as for solve my riddle. So I'm not a good enough cryptographer to know for sure, but maybe somebody else will be after the book comes out. Over nearby, there's another one that's kind of difficult to read now. Let me see how much bigger I can make this. It's a woman named Sarah Naylor, about whom not too much is known. But it's a poem that is weirdly broken up. The lines don't break where the rhyme is. One guy from the 1890s who was transcribing said it was engraved by a sculptor who evidently had no rhythm in his soul. But this one is an original poem. It says, here lies the body of Sarah Naylor, wife of Michael Naylor, who departed this life November 2nd, 1766, age 46 years and 9 months, 8 days. Let no one mourn the reason why her soul ascended to God on high, there with angels and archangels for to dwell. Hallelujah, hallelujah, to God on high. Now, what you can't see anymore, because it's the bottom couple inches of this are buried, but below that it says, made by herself 6 days before her death. And then right behind her are the oldest ones known in the cemetery. Get a bit of a zoom in on those. This is the very oldest one, Richard Churchyard, a kid who died back in the 1600s. And on the back, it's got these really creepy ornamentations that were popular at the time. And next to him, next to Richard on the left, is one for Anne Churchyard, who is thought to be his sister, though we don't really know. But buried on a very specific day in 1691. Well, here's the thing, what a few people found interesting in the old days is the very day that she was buried, likely the same day she died, Jacob Leisler was hanged for Leisler's rebellion. This was a thing in early colonial times. Mr. Leisler was afraid that some of the guards put in place by the old regime were still going to be trying to impose Catholicism on the colonies, which by then officially part of the Church of England. So he was eventually hanged right about where the Benjamin Franklin statue is now, near the entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge. Initially, he was buried right there, too, on the same day that Anne Churchyard would have been buried here. But after a few years, they decided he wasn't so bad after all and moved him to a proper cemetery, which they then tore down eventually. But through this, you can kind of plot some interesting traces of history, the way that people interacted with religion in those days. Officially, this was occupied by the Church of England. And throughout the early 1700s, things got rather testy. But over here, we've got an old slab mentioning a guy named Elias New, another guy from the 1600s, though he didn't really become famous till the 1700s. But this is a picture of Elias New that was published around the time of his lifetime. He's an interesting guy. He was born in France as a Protestant, but then France became an officially Catholic country, and he ended up fleeing. So he got to the United States, the colonies at the time, and started working as a sailor. But after working as a sailor, he was kidnapped by pirates who were working for the French, who brought him over to France, who said, okay, you got two choices. You can become a Catholic, or you can become a galley slave for life. And he chose slavery over becoming a Catholic, so they put him in the galley rowing with all the other guys. Then for a while he was imprisoned in Marseille, and then eventually in the Chateau d'If, the same prison from the Count of Monte Cristo. And he was locked up, didn't see the sun for months at a time, was occasionally able to write letters. So some of his letters actually survived and were published, hence why we've got this. Eventually, an intercession from the king, after several years of slavery and imprisonment, got him released from jail. He was already kind of famous by then. His plight was well known among churches. But he made his way back to New York, where he started the first school for enslaved people. Now, his motivations for this were entirely religious. He wanted to save their souls at a time when people thought that they might not even have, well, it was a common debate point whether or not enslaved people even had souls. But his was the first school for them. He had to cut things out a little bit in 1712 after there was a slave uprising, and he was briefly blamed for it until they realized that none of the people rising up had been in his school, which frankly I think today is kind of a mark against the school. But he is also an interesting case. He's also our main source, I think, or the best source that I know of some of the stories about Lady Cornbury. This is not a picture of Lady Cornbury. Lady Cornbury is buried inside of the church. She was buried inside of the church in the very early 1700s. 100 years later, they opened her crypt and found just like the nameplate and some fragments of the coffin and then reburied those under the tower. But this is a picture of Lord Cornbury, her husband, at least reputed to be. Now, there's a lot of stories about Lord Cornbury, who was in charge of the whole New York, New Jersey area for a while there, and rumored to be fabulously corrupt, also rumored to be very much in the habit of dressing in women's clothing. There is even a story that he attended his wife's funeral dressed in some of her clothes. How true this is kind of up to debate now. This is a portrait that was said to be him for a long time, though recent scholarship suggests that nobody thought it was him until 100 years after his death. Difficult to know, but there are letters from Elias New that talk about the fact that Lord Cornbury liked to dress up in women's clothes and parade around like that. It's a very interesting case. There's actually this sermon preached at Lady Cornbury's funeral was actually published as a pamphlet. There's not too much about her in there. We'll move up a little bit here. Here's another one that was restored in the 1800s that goes back to the early 1700s. This one is a guy by the name of Sidney Breeze, who was a merchant who was known as a very jovial, witty fellow, always having people over for wine parties. And he's got another one that says, made by himself. It says, "Ha, Sidney, Sidney, liest thou here? I here lie, until time has flown to its extremity." That, I guess, is his last words, as he wanted them to be. Well-known guy. This was considered one of the most famous epitaphs there for a while. But there's another dark side here. He was on the juries in 1740. There was another, at least supposed, uprising. A few different buildings caught on fire. There was a minor burglary. Then a teenage girl said it was all these people who owned a tavern where the slaves liked to hang out. They had induced them to do an uprising. They were going to burn the city and make this guy king. Eventually, quite a few people were condemned for this. People were burned at the stake. People were hanged. People were transported. Then about a month later, the same teenage girl said, well, really what happened was they had fallen under the influence of this guy, John Urey, who is secretly a Catholic priest. And this is where it gets weird. They decided that the whole thing had been part of a big, broader Catholic uprising. The trial transcripts for this are just bizarre to read today. It's interesting to note just how the extent to which people in early 1700 New York were taught to be scared to death of Catholics. And not just because of the fact that England and that France and Spain recognized a whole different king of England and were Catholic nations who were always threatening to blow up the colonies. But also they talk about them kind of the way that like people in Shakespeare's day would talk about Jews. They seem to have, even though they had been a country that was Catholic by law fairly recently in history, they seem to have no concept of what Catholics were like. The general sense I get is that John Urey was not a Catholic himself. He just was known to say that they weren't really as scary as all the urban legends. That was about enough. This was at a time when being a priest in New York was punishable by death. So the language that like the judges are using in these things, talking about how the fact that this could be a Catholic plot is proven by the blood of nations upon which the scarlet whore hath made herself drunk, and just on and on like this. It really kind of drives home the fact that these guys were living in a completely different world than we were. We could see some similarities to it, but what was going on here was less like the anti-abolitionist uprisings of a century later, more like the Salem witch trials of just half a century before. There were people who followed this news story who also remembered the Salem thing. But just as a bit of an anecdote from 1787, here's the role of the Manumission Society, the Anti-Slavery Society that was operating. And there are a few people from Trinity Church here. Dr. Charles McKnight is right by the gate. I don't know if Elijah Cock is there. Abraham Cock is there. Hamilton, of course. And what a great name down here at the bottom. Effingham Lawrence. Effingham Lawrence. My favorite names in weeks. Even on a list with Elijah Cock on it. Also, we saw this a little bit earlier. I might remember I mentioned there was some talk for a time of having Pine Street expanded and cutting right through Trinity Church. This was the subject of a lot of debate back in the 1840s. Trinity Church especially opposed the plan. So they decided all of a sudden that they were going to build a monument right here. So this is a monument to American soldiers who were killed in the Sugar House, a prisoner of war camp where they were held by the British, where various anecdotal evidence and eyewitness accounts say that a lot of their bodies were buried up here in the northern end of Trinity Church. So they added this monument in the 1840s. Some of the more cynical people pointed out, well, it didn't seem like they ever wanted to commemorate these guys before there was a threat of having the place torn up. But there's also one really interesting eyewitness account that I found that says that when they first put this up, there was a plaque on it that had the epitaph from Shakespeare's grave, which was, "Blessed be he that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." Now, apparently they took it down after about a day. But that was the idea. The whole idea of putting up this monument was really just to block the planned expansion of Trinity Church, of Pine Street that go right through Trinity Church. We'll also cover right over around here. Right by the entrance is Captain James Lawrence, the Don't Give Up the Ship guy from the War of 1812, but just beside him here, they just a couple of years ago added this little marker for a guy by the name of James Gordon. Now, James Gordon was a British officer during the Revolution. But here's what happened is right after the Cornwallis surrendered, after a lot of British officers had been taken prisoner until they could work out the whole peace talks over in Paris, a bunch of American ruffians killed a British guy on American soil. To retaliate, the British executed an American prisoner. By one account of the story, or at least rumor, the guy who had authorized the execution was William Franklin, who was a loyalist governor actively trying to derail the peace talks in which his father, Benjamin Franklin, was actively involved. There's a real schism in that particular family. And William's wife is in the next church over. So, when word of this got out that they had executed an American after the war had ended, there was a lot of calls for vengeance. There were a lot of people saying, "We've got Washington, you've got to hang somebody yourself." And Washington decided, well, yeah, I guess I kind of have to. So he went to James Gordon's company or sent word saying, "Have your men draw lots. Whoever draws the lot that says unfortunate is going to be executed." So they had the lottery. And this was kind of shocking at the time. It was, let me see if I can find the actual letters. A lot of people wrote letters about this. John Adams wrote to Robert Livingston, aforementioned. Where have I put this now? Okay, James Gordon. Looking over in my files here. So, under a whole lot of pressure, James Gordon may or may not have actually offered to take the young soldier's place. It was a soldier named Asgill got it, just a kid, really. But he reportedly said to Asgill, "I wish to God they would take me in your place. I am an old, worn-out trunk of a tree and have neither wife nor mother to weep for me." Now, this was a guy who Cornwallis had said was a real party animal and was actually surprised that he became such a great soldier. Now, there was a whole lot of letters about this. Hamilton wrote a letter saying that this is absolutely an atrocity. It goes against the genius of the age. It's a pretty good line on his part. Let's see if I can find that exact line. Yeah, wanton and unnecessary, derogatory to the national character, and entirely repugnant to the genius of the age we live in. But eventually, Asgill's wife appealed to King Louis of France. King Louis formally requested that his life be spared, and Congress in Washington decided, okay, we can save face if we just say we're doing it as a favor to England. John Adams wrote to Robert Livingston saying, "I cannot tell you the exquisite relief I had in my feelings. It would have been a horrid damp to the joys of peace if we had heard a disagreeable account." But then about a year later, James Gordon, who had been working and working to get this, to get his soldiers spared, was suffering from really ill health after this. By some accounts, he had a broken heart. So he went up to the Morris Mansion, now known as the Morris Jumel Mansion, which had once been Washington's headquarters. It was later Aaron Burr's house briefly after he married Eliza Jumel, who went from life being raised in a brothel all the way up to marrying the former vice president. He died there and was given a full military funeral here, but without a headstone. Then once again, I think they have no idea where he actually is, but they added this for him just fairly recently. It's one of those events that's recorded but not underlined in American history. We'll also just check out a couple of interesting epitaphs. Now, this one is Mary Dalzell. Let's see, I have the whole lines here. Adieu, my dearest babes and tender husband dear, the time of my departure is drawing near. And when I am laid low in the silent grave, where the monarch is equal with the slave, weep not, my friends, I hope there be at rest. To be with Jesus Christ, it is the best. Now, this one I say appears to be original, because I can't find it in any other books. A lot of these epitaphs that you see are common. They show up on lots of other tombstones, or they come from hymns by Isaac Watts. That was a popular source. But some of them, I'm especially fascinated by the ones that seem to be original. This is Abraham Williams, which is another one that's kind of broken all up, and the spelling is really especially unique. That being a nice way to put it. Stay, readers, and shed a tear, and think on me who now lies here, and as you read the state of me, think on the glass which runs for thee. In Christ alone I put my trust to rise in judgment with the just. Now, the last four lines show up on a lot of different gravestones with different variations, but the rest of it, the beginning, certainly seems to be original. The spelling is definitely original. Here's one of the sadder ones, with a very interesting source. Down here, we were born to die. 'Tis but expanding thought, and life is nothing. This comes from a comedy play. I have not read the entire comedy play. I believe it's The Lying Lover, I believe it's called. It was frequently quoted back at the time, but it's a comedy, but it also contains lines about how we were born to die. 'Tis but expanding thought, and life is nothing. How dark. All right, so those are some of the stories I've been digging into and trying to find primary sources on over the course of the past week or so, trying to put together the story of who these people were, how they interacted with history, and it's really kind of jarring. Complexity is the refuge of the powerful. It's kind of unfair to say that what happened in the 1740s was complex, but there's just so much more different motivating factors going around. Even a generation later, New Yorkers were just puzzled by the fact that people actually believed all of these stories. But, quick plug for some upcoming events. On May 4th, Thursday night, we will be doing Treason, the 1864 Chicago insurrection plot. Now, with that one from the 1740s, there's some debate as to whether there was actually a plot or not. There's also that case in Chicago, but there was definitely a plot. It might not have ever had a chance of working, but there was a plot. And also next weekend, just about a week, on May the 6th, we will be doing an in-person walking tour called Dark History on Taylor Street. Taylor Street, just west of the Loop, has so many different stories. There are gangsters, there are ghosts, there are arson queens, there are nuns whose bodies turned to stone, all kinds of great stuff. So lots and lots of things happening. Also, should you need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, etc., go to cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. Scratch and sniff stickers are still in the works. And with that, thanks everybody. I'll put the Benny Goodman back on. Carol, I got Mr. Ogden in a different deck, but he'll be in the book, sure. Thank you, Marita. It's very often when I say this, people reminisce about nuns they wish they had, nuns who taught them that they wish they could turn to stone. That's the great question, Heather. What sense would I put in Mysterious Chicago's scratch and sniff stickers? I don't know, Jardinera? Malort? Heather, yep, Malort. Old style. Carol, yeah, I got the marble stuff covered. I even have some of those in this deck. They have people like the Dancing Mayor, as they later came to call him. There are actually, a couple of years ago at least, I don't know if they're still there, but a couple of spaces in this were actually available for burial. The only available burial spaces in Manhattan. They were running for about $350,000 each. What we need is Mysterious Chicago action figures with Kung Fu grips. Joanne, we'll see on doing it again. Depends on how it sells, really. Right now, it's looking like a fairly small crowd in Taylor Street.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rag, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Oh, Lavinia Lane, actually, if only we had any idea what she actually looked like. Now we need figures of Mandy and Layla and the Dead Ringers. Now the tickets for the Dark History on Taylor Street tour are the same as like the cemetery tours. Go to mysteriouschicago.com. That should link you right up. Hey, Cassie. Enjoy Georgia, Cassie. Oh yeah, we'll do Grave Robbing 101 too. That'll be coming up pretty soon. I just like to kind of wait to make sure that the bathrooms are open. Yeah, you know, I don't really plan my tour schedule around the events of the British Crown. And anyway, they're 7 hours ahead, so it should be long over with by the time we do anything. Ooh, Disco Salad Bar action playset. Yes.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about her. Trucking.
Trucking. Yeah, Bob, don't get tangled up in your walker again. all over town. If I get an action figure, I'm gonna have ramming action. Can't believe Ram Man still works. He's like 40 years old now. Ellen, I will be in New York later this year, early summer, like the first week of June. I don't know if I'll have time to run a walking tour though. I just better have like a lightsaber that comes out of your arm. Now, Oakwood's coming soon too, for sure. I gotta get on all of these things. I gotta clean up this horrible mess that I've got in here so I can focus on these things. Goodbye, Vicky.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
All right, everybody. I am getting awfully hungry considering it's not even 11 o'clock yet. It is time for me to go have lunch. So let me plug one more time. Upcoming tours Thursday night, Treason, the 1864 Chicago insurrection plot. And May 6th, in person. Tickets available now. Dark History on Taylor Street. Just go to mysteriouschicago.com. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, telling you all to stay safe and stay strong. And of course, be like that night watchman at Trinity Church. And stay spooky. Have a good day, everybody.